Welcome to the Diabetes Podcast. Brace yourself. Today's episode is titled, The Case for Carbohydrates. Now, I know some of you are skeptical. Carbs, the enemy, the sugar bombs that spike your insulin, make you gain weight, and leave you sluggish. If you're deep into carnivore, keto, or low-carb territory, we get it. Carbs have been painted as the villain for decades. But here's the thing. What if the story you've been told about carbohydrates is missing most of the truth? What if, instead of being public enemy number one, carbs are actually vital for long-term health, performance, and even longevity? Today we're going to make a case, a strong case, for why carbohydrates deserve a front row seat on your plate. We're going to cover the history of the keto diet, why it sometimes, air quotes, works in the short term, and how people who say they're keto actually aren't. We'll dive into the metabolic science of ketones, insulin, and carb metabolism. We'll talk about nutrients that you've probably only been getting in meaningful amounts from carb-containing foods. And we'll close with what the research actually says is the most effective and sustainable way of eating for health and longevity. By the end of this episode, our promise is simple. Even if you don't walk away a carb lover, you'll walk away with a whole lot of respect for them. Let's go. Hello and welcome to the Diabetes Podcast. I'm Richie.
And I'm Amber.
And Amber, I feel like this one has the potential to hurt some feelings. The topic for our listeners with diabetes, it's a bit provocative.
It's okay. I think that we're going to get comfortable with getting uncomfortable because that's where a lot of change can happen. And I believe in openness. I believe in just talking about it. Okay. Seeing what's there.
All right. So you're the subject matter expert on all things diabetes. Tell us.
Not all things diabetes. A lot of things.
Most things diabetes.
Okay. So let's start with ketones.
Okay.
The ketogenic diet. A little bit of history here. It actually started as a medical therapy, not as this weight loss hack that it has become. It was first introduced in the 1920s as a treatment for epilepsy in children, so seizures essentially. Mm-hmm. Clinical data showed that restricting carbohydrates drastically lowered seizure frequency. So fast forward decades later, low-carb dieting resurfaces in the mainstream, first by Dr. Atkins with his Atkins diet, then with paleo, and now this new resurgence. Maybe we can call it Keto 2.0. I don't know. But I think the reason why is because when you slash carbs, you lose water weight quickly, you suppress appetite, and you tend to burn fat. And for the short term, it can feel magical.
You said that keto makes you lose water weight quickly. How does that work?
Well, for glycogen storage in your muscles. So your primary storage source for glycogen. So the word glycogen again is just stored glucose. That's glycogen. And so you store the majority of your glycogen in your liver. And so that in between meals, you can have the energy that you need. But also you store it in your muscles, like at the point of use, right, if you will. I kind of think of it like your muscles are the refrigerator and your liver is the grocery store. Okay. Kind of. It's not the best analogy, but we all know I'm working on analogies. So when you store glycogen in the muscles, it requires 2 molecules of water to be attached to that. So naturally, as you shed that glycogen, because you're depleting your body stores of glucose, you're shedding that stored glucose in the muscles. That's why you could look more cut, if you will, if you have depleted glycogen. And so a lot of bodybuilders understand this, and they will not have glycogen before a show. They'll limit salt intake and glucose so that they look
water
quote
intake,
unquote more cut.
Yeah,
it's just water. So it's stored water in the muscles that you lose, but it's a phenomenal amount of weight, through water, not fat. Let's be clear. And so people like that more cut look, and on the scale, they incorrectly believe that this is fat loss because weight loss is weight loss to a lot of people, So, yeah, good question.
Well, it's easy to measure. Body composition is hard to measure accurately very accurately, I should say, without some very sophisticated equipment. They're doing better with some wearables and some devices and kind of stuff, but there is a decent margin of error. But weight is weight is weight, and that's a pretty low hanging metric for being able to measure progress. But you're not getting
true progress.
Yeah, you're not getting all of the information as far as it relates to body composition.
It's an incomplete picture of body composition. Exactly. And getting back to ketosis, when most people say, yes, I'm eating keto or what have you, the truth is they are not. Most people who say that are not actually in ketosis, because true nutritional ketosis means your ketones are elevated consistently. And usually this is at 0.5 millimoles per liter or above.
For what?
And
what was that?
if you don't know what that is, you're not in ketosis, because you really have to be testing. It requires a very, very high fat intake. So most people who are doing like low carb or think they're eating ketones are doing more like bacon and steak and, these a lot of protein,
coconut oil
tuna,
and butter and all that good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's probably why butter's in the diet more, because they are realizing they need more fat. But anyway, if you really track actual blood ketone data, you're going to find that people rarely sustain that state. They're not metabolically living on ketones. They're just low carbs. So here's the catch. Keto works as a weight loss tool, not because carbs themselves cause fat gain, but because the diet limits options. You can't eat the donuts. You can't eat the chips and the pretzels and the empty calories.
And I guess specifically as it relates to diabetes, all of the stuff that is going to cause a pretty severe insulin response is kind of, taken out of even the realm of possibility. So, okay.
Yeah. And so what you find over the long term is, as with most diets, air quotes, these restrictive type things, sustainability is going to plummet. And studies show that the same thing, within a year or two, most people drift back to eating carbs because, we are human. We like the social nature of food. We enjoy carbohydrates, their chewiness and all of this. And there are very few people who sustain it for years and years and years. Although it's more and more these days. I've seen a lot more people who have. So, yeah.
Well, and if this is off topic, I apologize. But, we've talked in previous episodes about kind of displacing foods, right? Is some of the success of this just that you're displacing stuff that you would normally have eaten more of?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the, every diet works if you follow it, right? For the most part, it really is about calorie restriction. So if I have reduced something that I was typically overeating on in the first place, wouldn't at least some of that weight loss be attributed to that?
Yes, historically, a low carb diet would have worked for you because you would be eliminating gummy bears, and you would be
and the hate speech surrounding gummy bears. I tell you what.
Oh, I can't help it. So,
anecdotally,
yeah.
And again, we can cut this out if we need to. I remember. This is probably circa 2000.
Oh, we're talking the summer of the Rue?
No.
Oh, okay,
this
different.
is even before that. This is like 2008, maybe 2009.
I don't know.
Probably 2009. I was still in the reserve at that point in time, and one of my friends was trying to reduce weight for weigh-in. He was struggling to weigh in for his test and that kind of stuff. So we did a challenge. And Amber's like, well, I can help you out. And basically put me on a very carb restricted diet. And I remember I was probably 7 pounds had lost at that point in time. And I wasn't big to begin with. But when I got to the top of a flight of stairs and was out of breath, I realized I don't think I could do this anymore. And I called him immediately to throw in the towel, because it was, I'd never been gassed like that with just normal physical activity, not even like a workout or anything like that. I just had no juice.
Absolutely. And we'll dive into that a little more as we go along, but it is a slower metabolic pathway that you were utilizing then. And if you are going up a flight of stairs, you could really feel it. Yeah. But I want to be clear, like ketones themselves are not evil. You know, the fact that your body naturally produces them when you skip meals or as you're sleeping, but living in this chronic keto mode, like this bathing in ketones 24/7 is not what we are evolved for physiologically. It's not the normal physiologic state. So like if you think about diabetic ketoacidosis or DKA, in type 1 diabetes where there's no insulin, ketones can really skyrocket to dangerous levels, and it can be very life-threatening. And really probably the most detrimental person for diabetic ketoacidosis these days can be the person with type 2, who is male. Sorry, but that's just the more at-risk person, who never knew they had diabetes, was not really formally diagnosed because they didn't go to the doctor for years. And it's just been kind of gradually coming on that they felt more tired and just slept more. And then they are thirsty. So they're drinking sodas and Mountain Dew and orange juice like crazy. And then they come in with ketoacidosis, and it can be very dangerous for them because it just they don't recognize the signs and symptoms and seek medical care.
So what, and again, can you just very briefly, because like what you're describing is the large undiagnosed population that is dealing with this disease in some capacity. Like what are the warning signs, and again, very, very Cliff Notes version, like if you notice this, and if you notice this, go get checked out because this can happen, something like that.
Well, I mean, as diabetes progresses, you're going to feel more thirsty. You're going to have frequent urination. You might be getting up in the middle of the night to pee, whereas you never did that before. But that's more like high blood sugars, and then the recognition of high blood sugars if you've never been one to pay attention or experience them before. Whereas diabetic ketoacidosis is more of a feeling of nausea, and one symptom of ketone production in general is that your body is going to try to get rid of this acidotic state, and you're going to be breathing off you're going to off gas sort of. And the breath could smell fruity or like nail polish remover. Okay. And so if you've got that nail polish remover breath and you're feeling very nauseous, like you're going to vomit, absolutely go to the doctor. And one reason why SGLT2 inhibitors are not indicated for the treatment of type 1 diabetes, even though they can help them spill out excess glucose when the sugars are too high, is because they can present to the ER in diabetic ketoacidosis with lower blood sugar levels. So what historically ER physicians would be looking for with somebody in DKA are these crazy high blood sugar levels, 800, 900, 1,000, like really crazy high. And very likely that person feels sick, nauseous, throwing up, all of these things. But in the person in DKA on something like Farxiga or Jardiance or other SGLT2 inhibitors, they could present with what would be considered normal blood sugars for somebody with diabetes, especially insulin requiring diabetes. And so they wouldn't just think they have the flu or they've got some sort of stomach bug and would send them home when in fact they required intensive management in the hospital for the acidosis, because this could send them into a coma and could even cause death.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It is probably, other than really severe hypoglycemia, the thing that people with type 1 are most afraid of.
So for, again, just general population, if your partner is experiencing, has been experiencing lethargy and is currently experiencing nausea and has fruity or nail polish smelling breath, probably want to get that checked out immediately.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So all that to say that this life-threatening diabetic ketoacidosis it's not the same nutritional ketosis and diabetic ketoacidosis, but people who are insulin dependent on a keto diet, this can be very, very dangerous because they're kind of like a little hop and a skip away from slipping into diabetic ketoacidosis if they're not careful. Okay. And what I really wanted to illustrate is that the overlap there shows you that ketones are an emergency fuel system and not the body's preferred daily currency. Your brain, your muscles, your red blood cells, these tissues thrive on glucose. And that's the body saying, look, carbs are not optional.
It's really kind of like a famine adaptation as I understand it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a very good summation. Mm-hmm. So what I also would like to talk about is something I've noticed in people who have type 1 diabetes and their insulin to carbohydrate ratios. So, insulin dependent people with diabetes require insulin to cover carbohydrate containing foods. And what I have noticed through the years is that somebody who is carb avoidant or really restricting their carbs is going to have a much stronger carb to insulin ratio than somebody who is not restricting their carbohydrates. And what I've seen is people doing this can be on like a 1-to-3 or a 1-to-4 carb. So they need 1 unit of insulin to cover every 3 to 4 grams of carbs versus someone who's not restricting carbs might only need 1 unit of insulin to cover 12 or 15 grams of carbs. So we're talking major differences.
So despite the fact that they're not having a lot of carbs, proportionally are taking a lot more insulin. Is that? Yeah,
exactly. And what I've noticed is when somebody avoids carbs for a long period, their body becomes less efficient at using carbs when they get reintroduced as well. So when you see, so it's almost like it enforces that behavior because they're like, oh, see, I had carbs and look, the sugar skyrocketed. Therefore, I have to keep this up of restricting the carbs because look what that blood sugar did when I had it. Mm-hmm.
Is that a function of I'm just more sensitive to glucose because I've decreased the amount coming in on a regular basis?
Yeah, there's this concept called physiological insulin resistance. So we normally talk about insulin resistance in response to central adiposity or fat around the midsection and within the visceral organs, and you've got that insulin resistance. This happens this physiological insulin resistance happens when the glucose transporters get downregulated. When your muscles are basically saying, we're good without carbs, thanks, and move along, Mm-hmm. But then when you reintroduce carbs, boom, completely less efficient. And studies back this up. So research has noted that individuals on very low carb diets may experience higher blood sugar excursions and greater insulin requirements. So nothing that I didn't say a minute ago, but just saying that that's what the studies show as well when they eat the carbs again. So it's really not a pathology that's happening. It's not something broken with the system, which can happen more with type 2 insulin resistance. This is more of an adaptation to that low carb lifestyle. But it's not what you want to see happen if you want metabolic flexibility.
So I've heard you talk about this before. I've certainly heard other people talk about this before. Can you break down metabolic flexibility a little bit?
I can try. Yes.
Like to me, it sounds like
there is no try.
The flex fuel vehicles in the late 90s that they tried to push, where they were trying to have a high ethanol blend and a regular gasoline blend, and it didn't last very long. But if you're buying American cars in the late 90s, that was a thing.
I don't know if I can speak to that, but I can give more of a practical example. So, if you skip breakfast, your body is going to smoothly transition to using fat for fuel. Mm-hmm. And then later, when you eat a bowl of beans and rice, your body is going to efficiently shift to glucose. And you're not going to have these massive glucose spikes as a response to that. Whereas if you have an inflexible metabolism, when you skip breakfast, you're going to feel shaky. You're going to feel irritable, low energy possibly. And then when you eat the beans and rice, your blood sugar is flying up to 300 or 400, assuming you're insulin dependent, just depends. And then just crashes later on. And you see this kind of roller coaster. Now, there's a lot of things that can cause this roller coaster of blood sugars for sure. But this is one of the things that can contribute to those highs and lows flying around. So the reason why it matters is that if your body can only use one fuel well, like let's say fat, then when carbs enter the system, you get those exaggerated spikes in blood sugar and also exaggerated spikes in insulin. Mm-hmm. And that's really showing that metabolic inflexibility there. If you're talking about performance as a former sprinter, wannabe kind of sprinter again, during these high intensity efforts, you were talking about going upstairs, your muscles need and crave glucose. And if you're highly fat adapted, but carb intolerant, then your performance can definitely suffer as a result of that. And then metabolic inflexibility is also shown to be linked with insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, all those little words that we talked about in former podcasts about the core defects in type 2. So if you're really metabolically flexible, that is considered a marker of good metabolic health. Okay. And good metabolic health is going to protect you from things like insulin resistance and inflammation and all of that.
So what promotes metabolic flexibility?
I would say regular exposure to both fuels, which is part of the reason I wanted to talk about restricting carbs, because eating a balanced diet with both carbs, fat, protein is going to keep your body trained to use each one of those efficiently. And then in terms of exercise, if you do a mixture of aerobic and anaerobic. So aerobic is going to be where you can talk and you can, maybe walking would be more aerobic, or you could carry on a conversation while jogging. Whereas anaerobic is going to be more of your sprinting and going upstairs and things like that. So basically just not chronically restricting one macronutrient. That's the main thing, because that can make your system kind of rusty at handling carbs. Just like if you never did endurance exercise, you're not gonna be able to run that marathon.
That drops off very quickly.
It sure does.
I am very disappointed to find. Yeah.
Yep. So basically, if you have a healthy metabolism, your ability to switch back and forth easily between the different fuel sources for your body, it's going to be better.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So tell me about what carbs actually bring to the table.
All right. It's so easy to demonize carbs when you only see them as sugar, bread, rice, pasta. But carbs are not just some food to be demonized. You know, they are a macronutrient. You have 3 macronutrients: carbs, protein, and fat. So this is 1/3 of your macronutrients that your body needs. And carbohydrate-rich foods give us fiber, which are only found in plant foods. Fiber plays a role in regulating blood sugar, supporting cholesterol balance. It feeds your gut microbiome, increasing GLP-1 activity.
I need you to say that last one again and very loud, because we're going to need to bang this drum on just about every episode until I think the general population gets it, that fiber is your lowest hanging fruit as it relates to increasing your natural GLP-1 release.
And let me just translate that, even though we've talked about it in many other podcasts. Feeling fullness, you know, really feeling satiated. If that hunger monster lives on your back constantly,
Get that
fiber is your crowbar to pry that guy off of there, you know, and kick him in the butt and go somewhere else, you know. So and that's just like the tip of the iceberg, but it's also going to lower some cancer risk, more specifically colon cancer. Whereas carnivore and keto are practically fiber free. Like I don't want to know the bowel habits of someone on a carnivore diet. Like I can guess.
Usually I'm the one bringing this up, so good on you, Amber.
Well, dietitians, we talk about.
But I think we also need to specify, you know, we're not saying just go guzzle Metamucil or something like that.
Right, not the same.
Fiber from typically your whole plant food sources.
Whole grains. Yep. Whole plants. Exactly. Some other nutrients that you're pretty much gonna find in your carb sources are whole grains, your beans. So if I say legumes, I'm pretty much saying beans, peas, you know, that whole family of bean-like things and fruits. These are major sources, and studies repeatedly show that in low carb diets, you're going to have some micronutrient deficiencies in the B vitamins and folate. And we also have the phytonutrients and phytochemicals. So these are the plant chemicals that act as very strong antioxidants in your body, very strong cancer fighting properties.
Very strong anti-inflammatories. Which specifically for type 2 and or for all types of diabetes, really, it is first and foremost, you know, combating that onset of inflammation is really the big overarching key to
preventing disease in general, not just diabetes, but really keeping these are fighting disease in your body. Flavonoids, polyphenols, carotenoids, these antioxidants come almost exclusively from colorful plant carbohydrate foods, and you don't get resveratrol or quercetin or anthocyanins from steak. Just saying.
I'm just imagining a scenario in which I have to spell resveratrol or one of my kids is at risk, and I'm like, sorry, kid, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Quercetin? What?
It's a real thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've talked about these in the cancer. So if you are curious about all those words I just said, they are in the Cancer and Diabetes podcast. Don't want to get us too off track here. But minerals like magnesium, potassium, manganese, these are all abundant in carb-rich plant foods. And think of carbs as nutrient delivery vehicles, if you will.
Okay.
You know, if you cut these carbs out, you're not just cutting sugar, you're cutting out your fiber, a lot of your minerals, vitamins. And here's a fun fact, 90% of the phytochemicals that protect against chronic disease are from carbohydrate sources.
Say that again slowly.
90%. I think about that sloth in that one cartoon that our kids liked.
Yeah, it's Zootopia, I think.
Utopia thing. Zootopia. Yes. 90% of the phytochemicals that protect against chronic disease are found from carbohydrate sources.
So if
that micronutrient carbohydrates.
Spelling it out, if I am on a keto diet, I'm probably missing out on up to 90% of the nutrients that I need to prevent chronic disease.
I'm shaking my head. Yes, I should probably say yes. Since this is a podcast. Yes.
Okay. Well, the Liver King is starting to make a lot more sense now. All right.
If you say so. All right.
Or rather, his situation is starting to make a lot more sense now. How about that?
Yeah. Oh, talk about not calling people out. You did it.
God bless him. He needs some help.
Yeah.
In the form of whole plant-based foods.
Anyway, different topic. Let's talk about high-fat diets and longevity, because we mentioned keto and protein. The other side of this is having more fat, and when you have, so remember, carbs, protein, fat. If you're eliminating carbs, all you got left is protein and fat.
I'm replacing it with another.
Exactly. Yeah. So these high fat diets that are replacing carbs, like the long-term data on this is really sobering.
Yeah. And I think that really is kind of the take home, that so many of these things have popped up in recent years, and what
are the long-term effects?
They absolutely will work short term. Mm-hmm. But like Atkins died of heart disease.
If that's like, hello, thank you for saying that. Absolutely. Like high saturated fat intake, which is almost like, it's hard to follow this type of diet and not have a high saturated fat intake. It's consistently linked with increased cardiovascular disease risk. Evidence shows that animal heavy, low carb diets often increase LDL cholesterol significantly. And the largest population studies that are in existence, studies like the Nurses Health Study, EPIC, PURE, others, they all find that plant-forward, carbohydrate-inclusive diets track with longer life expectancy. These are going hand in hand. And even protein comes with some nuance here, because the higher animal protein intake has also been correlated. So there is an important distinction here between correlation and not causation. Mm-hmm. It has been correlated with higher rates of mortality, particularly from cancer and heart disease, compared with plant protein. So if you look at longevity research from the blue zones, it tells us something very undeniable, that people who live the longest eat diets rich in carbohydrate containing plants.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings us into the diets that are, I don't want to say the cream of the crop, because that's kind of completely anti.
Well, let's bring it back home to our audience. Mm-hmm. If I have type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, we hear it all the time. I need to know what to eat.
Right. Just tell me what to eat. Just give me the diet. Tell me what to eat.
So for folks
all the time,
with living with diabetes, which are the best, which are the most beneficial? And obviously there's always nuance. Please, different folks have different tastes and all this kind of stuff. But I think there's some pretty big generalities that a lot of these have in common.
Yes, the experts recommend. So I recommend this, but not just me. This is not This is not just me. This is the American Institute for Cancer Research. This is the American Heart Association. This is the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. This is eatright.org. You know, these certain ways of eating, these diets, these three come up again and again and again across research and across these different governing bodies that or research bodies that recommend this. Number one, the Mediterranean diet, rich in fruits, veggies, whole grains, beans, nuts, olive oil, and some moderate fish. Just massive evidence shows that this way of eating reduces heart disease, cancer, and improves longevity. And then the DASH diet, which we talked about on the salt episode or the sodium
check
episode.
That out if you haven't done so already.
Yep, came about to try to find ways to help lower blood pressure. And it really emphasizes veggies, fruits, low-fat dairy, beans, and whole grains. And the track record that the DASH diet has on reducing hypertension is just bar none. Like you can't find data out there that reduces blood pressure like the DASH diet does.
So if you have diabetes and high blood pressure, DASH is the way to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I say absolutely with nuance that you preface the whole thing with.
But again, if I want something that kind of addresses the worst parts of both or makes both better, let's just call it that. DASH is what you'd recommend.
That or a whole food plant-based diet or the truth is yes, DASH because it's the Mediterranean diet, but really emphasizing lower sodium versions of a lot of that. Because you could do the other two and not really be reducing sodium, depending. But for most people who are eating a whole food plant-based diet, remember the sodium intake for the day was about 1,500 milligrams, which is right in line with DASH diet recommendations as well. So,
and I think we also talked about, I think this also was in the sodium episode, that the majority of the sodium in the diet is actually coming from the processed food. So if, regardless of which of these you're on, if I'm cutting the majority of the processed food out, it will dynamically reduce the sodium intake.
Which you could argue is another reason why lower carb diets tend to work, because most people on that are eliminating a lot of the processed foods from their diet because you can't just grab chips or crackers or cookies or that sort of thing. So the third diet is the whole food plant-based way of eating. And this diet just goes further focusing on whole, unrefined plant carbs from beans to whole grains to fruits. And there's really good data showing improvement in diabetes, heart health, and even reversal of certain other conditions. But all three of these research-backed ways of eating are carb abundant. None of these are low carb. None of these are carnivore. So the takeaway there is it's not that this is not a podcast about defending carbs. This is a podcast about reclaiming carbs and hopefully shedding light on the fact that carbs are not villains.
Yeah.
They are really the foundation of the world's healthiest diets, from the energy they provide, the fiber, vitamins, minerals, hundreds of phytochemicals you literally cannot get anywhere else. Carbs are not the problem.
And I think furthermore, again, tie it back to our population, right? Carbs are going to be a part of the long-term solution of putting this thing into remission. You know, probably safe to say the carbohydrates you get from whole food plant-based sources did not add to the other stuff that made diabetes worse in the first place. This isn't the reason that
they're not contributing to insulin resistance.
Exactly.
They're not the major contributors to inflammation. In fact, they are on the other side of that coin. They are the ones fighting the inflammation, fighting the insulin resistance.
Don't hate the macro, hate the subset of the macro.
All right. Right. Because the problem is sodas, white flour, added sugars.
Processed and ultra processed foods
Yep.
are long term going to need to be an increasingly smaller portion of your total intake.
Right.
So we try to do a takeaway every week. Amber, if you could, what is one simple, easy thing that our listeners can do to start reintegrating some, let's just call it, they're one of the good ones, one of the good carbs, the not evil carbs, the not making me sick carbs, the carbs that are going to promote healing in my body. When you're working with somebody and they want to know what carbs are okay, what's one thing that they can do this week to start?
This week, take inventory. We've talked about this before. Take inventory. Where is an ultra processed food making its way into your normal eating pattern? Where is it? Is it the Starbucks in the morning? Is it the ice cream at night? Like, where is the ultra processed food coming in? Number one. And number two, what healthier, higher fiber carb can you replace that with? A fruit, a non-starchy vegetable. So when I say non-starchy vegetable, I mean any vegetable you could think of that is not a corn, potato, or bean, even though beans are very healthy, very high in fiber. But
and if you've listened to any podcast,
we definitely
know
are
that
promoting
we are pro
beans.
bean around here.
We are pro beans, but for this exercise, replace it with a non-starchy vegetable or fruit.
Okay. So this was not quite as much as it normally was. This is a reasonable amount to take in. I've learned some stuff.
Awesome.
Thanks for tuning in to the Diabetes Podcast, and we will talk to you again next week.
Have a lovely week.
So here's the takeaway. Carbs don't need defending. They need reclaiming. They're not villains. They're the foundation of the world's healthiest diets. From the energy they provide to the fiber, vitamins, minerals, and hundreds of phytochemicals you literally can't get anywhere else. Carbs are not the problem. The problem is refined junk. Sodas, ultra-processed white flour foods, added sugars. That's not carbohydrates, that's marketing gone wild. If you lump raspberries and lentils into the same buckets as donuts and candy, of course carbs look bad. But the truth is clear. A diet that celebrates whole, carbohydrate-rich foods is the one most consistently linked to long-term health and longevity. And that's not just theory, it's global, it's ancestral, and it's written in decades of research. So maybe the next time you sit down to eat, instead of asking, how do I avoid carbs? Ask yourself a better question. What whole, colorful, carbohydrate-rich food can I add to my plate today? Because your body isn't asking you to go keto. It's asking you to give it the energy and nutrients it was built to thrive on. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to the podcast to stay connected with the latest research, expert insights, and practical steps for going beyond managing diabetes and working towards type 2 diabetes remission. Until next time, take courage. You can do this, and we can help.